Hello and welcome to Social Workers Rise, where we inspire social workers to connect, expand their knowledge, and change more lives than they ever thought possible. We will talk everything social work on every level from micro to macro. We are going to hear stories of social workers who are doing big things, learn new skills, and most importantly, give you actionable steps to make a difference today. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Social Workers Rise. It is your host, Catherine, here. Today, we're going to be talking about therapeutic orientations and how the heck to respond to this awkward question when you are new to the field, maybe new to a clinical setting, and you get asked this in your interview because chances are, if you are working in any type of therapeutic setting, whether it be working in the community with children, working with families, working with seniors, working with older adults, even hospice, you will likely get asked this question. And even if you don't, it's still really good to be able to know what your therapeutic orientation is and what does this even mean and what are our options here. So if you're anything like me, and I guess I'll pause here. So just a little bit about me is my name is Catherine. I'm the host of Social Workers Rise podcast. I started this podcast in January of 2020 from a place of frustration and near burnout and realizing that the toxic narratives in the social work industry needed to change and I couldn't just stay and not do anything and not try anything. So I decided to start a podcast, and here we are, years later, and it's been going great. I'm based out of Southern California, so all of this information that you get from me is based off of my experience as a social worker since 2009, and I'm really excited that you're here. Other services I provide are coaching, private therapy, mental health training, and social work courses. And the information from this particular podcast episode is included in the course, The Clinical Essentials for the Future Therapist, which essentially is a big course, super valuable, that leads you through the therapeutic process from assessment to documentation to CBT, other interventions, and eventually termination. So, with that said, let's hop into it, shall we? First, I want to really explain what a therapeutic orientation is. Like what do I even mean when I say this? And this is essentially the therapeutic interventions or therapeutic modality that you are most comfortable with using with your clients. And if you're anything like me, this question always triggers a lot of imposter syndrome. It brings up feelings of self-doubt and especially anxiety because I really never knew how to answer this question. Nobody ever really taught me how to handle this question. And also, too, I really didn't have a lot of experience to know exactly what my therapeutic orientation was, because this is one of those things that you learn over time, right? It would be like asking you about something that you're just starting out with, right? Like riding a bike. And someone says, hey, what's your favorite type of bike? And you're saying, well, I don't really know. I just kind of know. I learned one type of bike, how to ride that. So that's what I do. And I'm practicing that, which is perfectly okay, right? There's so many different therapeutic orientations. And just to give you an overview, is you probably learned about all of these in your grad school. I'm not sure if they covered these things in the bachelor's level program, but if you did something related to counseling or social work or marriage and family therapy, maybe, or psychology, maybe, right? But for sure, you're going to get these therapeutic modalities in your master's program. This was where I really was connecting the dots between, okay, so the population has this program, for example, anxiety, right? This population struggles with anxiety. And in your bachelor's, you learn about that population. What triggers the anxiety? Like, what are the systematic influences that cause these things, right? But then in your master's, that's really where you're able to dig in deeper into how to actually help them with the anxiety. And this can be used with everything, right? With addiction, with behavior changes, with everything, right? So, some of the big therapeutic modalities that you've probably heard of and you probably learned about in grad school, right? I'll just say right now, if you've never learned about a therapeutic modality, then you really don't have one, right? You don't have one. But if you were taught these things at a university, within your college setting, within like at work. So if your supervisor has been teaching you a specific therapeutic modality, then that counts too. So these are the examples of what I'm talking about, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. That is a really big one that a lot of people learn because it's essentially how our brains work, and it helps to interrupt those dysfunctional behaviors and actions, right? Other ones might be dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, or for trauma, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. But there's other ones that maybe are a little lesser known, a little less trendy right now. But some other ones, for example, Gestalt, Gottman, grief therapy, even compassion focused, couples therapy, play therapy, person centered, trauma focused, solution focused, somatic, strengths based. So a lot of different types of therapy modalities. In the course that I mentioned earlier, the Clinical Essentials for the Future Therapist, I've included a list of the 40 most common therapy modalities, and it also tells you a brief summary about what these therapeutic modalities are, what they consist of, what kind of interventions you would use. So it's important because when you understand the different types of therapy modalities, that's when you can say, oh, that's actually what I do with clients. For example, if you learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, which if you went to a master's program in social work, uh, in marriage and family therapy, in counseling, you have likely learned CBT, right? So if you have, that is good. And if you have the opportunity to where you have utilized CBT with your clients, then that counts as well. So just to kind of put a little bow on it, I'll give you the words to say in case you're ever asked this into an interview, right? So if I'm the interviewer and say, hello, what would you say is your primary therapeutic modality? You can say something to the extent of like this. I primarily utilize, and then insert whatever. We'll use cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT in my approach. I like this approach because it's versatile to a lot of different populations. However, I don't only utilize CBT, but I really tailor the therapeutic techniques to the needs of my clients. And I'm also open to utilizing, and then you can insert whatever they might be, right? But some common ones might be solution focused therapy, strengths based therapy, trauma informed therapy, humanistic, right? So those are a lot of the common ones that are really focused around social work values that you might be using. But definitely look those up before you start throwing them around in interviews. So, what I want you to do with this is, so just to finish that, you can insert those and just say, I really adapt my support to the needs of my clients and I'm open to learning more, right? So that really just sums it up for the interviewer that you have something that you're confident in, or that you're learning more about, or that you at least have a primary foundational knowledge on how to use it with clients. You're not going to be an expert in this. And you can also mention that I have taken a class on this, or during my class, I learned about how to use it. And in my internship, I used it this way with a client. But you really need to be aware of, one, what the different therapeutic modalities are, and which ones align with your personal style, right? So that is my takeaway from this is, if you're preparing for an interview, especially a clinical interview, where you're going to be working one-on-one directly with clients in an individual setting, look these up. If this is something that you want more support around, I highly encourage you to look at that course, the clinical essentials for the future therapist, right? Because I include all of this. And if finding your therapeutic modality is something that you feel that you need to do, that you're interested in learning more about, definitely consider purchasing that course and getting in there and getting into the modules, because this will help you come across as very confident, very sure of the skills that you have, very self-aware, and also too, you'll know where you want to go, what other skills that you might want to learn about. It can give you material on questions to ask the interviewer or your supervisor and say, I'm really interested in learning more about X, Y, and Z therapeutic modality. Do you happen to be trained in that? What therapeutic modalities do you come from? Are you going to be supervising me in? Right? So a lot of different ways to use this information. If this was helpful for you, let me know. You can tag me on Instagram. I'm at Social Workers Rise. Send this to a friend, open up your phone, send the little arrow button and text it to your colleague if this was helpful for you. I really appreciate you sharing and being here with me. If you want more social work resources, make sure that you are on my email list, because on Fridays, I will send out resources to you, including tools and tips, updates on the podcast, upcoming events that are happening in the social work world. You don't want to miss it. I'll talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Social Workers Rise. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe and text this episode to a friend. If you want more, there are a few ways we can get to know each other and work together. First, definitely subscribe to the Friday resource email list. The link is in the show notes. And that's where you can learn more about the courses I offer, including Clinical Essentials for the Future Therapist and the Pulse Basics for Medical Social Workers. I'll also be sending out occasional tips and resources and other happenings within the social work industry. And for all your clinical supervision needs, be sure to visit risedirectory.com. This is a national directory of clinical supervisors for social workers, and we also provide free resources that you can use within your own clinical supervision. Lastly, if you have more individualized needs, I do offer coaching, individual consultations, and am available for public speaking engagements for social workers and change makers. Lastly, the boring legal stuff, but very important. The information in this podcast is not meant to be a supplement for therapy, professional advice, or clinical supervision. This content is provided as is solely for informational purposes. It is not legal, health, or safety advice. I am not advising you as a therapist. Organizations should engage their own experts to ensure any adopted measures are compliant with applicable laws and standards in their jurisdictions. The opinions expressed by individuals or organizations are their own and do not reflect the views or opinions of Social Workers Rise or Catherine Moore. References to specific products or organizations do not constitute any endorsement or recommendations by Social Workers Rise.